Thank you so much. And Admiral Froman told me she's counting on me, so I'm going to make sure I do the best I can up here. But I'd be remiss if I really just didn't quickly start with doing what everyone else has done and really recognize the West Foundation. And for me personally, I run an organization that funds job training programs with and through community-based organizations, school districts, large and small, across San Diego County. And there are a few colleagues that I have in San Diego County who I trust and admire as much as Aaron Spiewak from the Gary and Mary West Foundation. And the work that the organization does puts me in a place that when I know I'm in the room with the West Foundation, I know we're in the right place. So thank you for what you've done for this program, and thank you for giving us an opportunity to be partners with you in so many ways. Probably the most important part of my bio is, and I'm going to talk a little bit about, is actually my wife and her experiences. But as I saw the shadow box come up a moment ago, it struck me that I just came back from Massachusetts, where I'm from, spending some time with my 94-year-old grandfather and looking at his shadow box, knowing that I was going to be here and knowing that there was a lot that I wanted to talk about. He had just lost his second wife, but as a second marriage, it was a 52-year marriage. So he lost his best friend. But we were sitting down and we were looking at a lot of memorabilia, and for him, the memorabilia that matters the most when he thinks of himself personally is his shadow box and the awards that he received and the medals that he received in World War II. My grandfather was a World War II veteran. My mentor in life was a Vietnam veteran. My wife is a veteran of Iraq and numerous humanitarian missions around the world. And I can't even tell you how humbling it is to stand in this room and recognize all of you for your service and your support to this country and your sacrifices, and to sit in a room of such great people and have an opportunity to speak and address all of you on what I think is so critical and important these days. And it's the step that you all are about to make, and that's transitioning from the service that you've provided through the military to all of the places that we need you to go as civilians. And so my wife served in Iraq during the invasion, and it was actually she who brought me to San Diego more than 10 years ago. When she finished medical school back in Boston, she was on a naval scholarship. Her dad was a Navy officer in Vietnam as well, and she always knew that she wanted to do something to give back. So the naval scholarship was always what she intended to take. That was before 2001, so a lot of folks who were taking those naval scholarships in those days weren't looking at a world that is quite the same as the world that we look at now. When we moved to San Diego in 2001, and again, that's what brought us here, I had an opportunity to continue the work that I did in Boston here, and that work at its core is focused on putting people to work and getting them the skills and the training that they need to make it, to navigate the economy, regardless of what the challenges and the difficulties are. When my wife was deployed to Iraq, I remember that being not shocking at all with what had happened in the world and not in exactly what she had expected. She would tell you all to this day it was the best experience she's ever had serving the men and women of our country as their doctor on the ground, working with the Marines as they advanced from Kuwait to Baghdad. And I remember writing her a letter every day she was there, every single day, without exception. And I did that because, like I said, a colleague of mine who served in Vietnam told me, write to her every day and make sure she knows that somewhere in the world, someone's still doing the work that you do. Somewhere in the world, people are still watching the Lakers play at night. Somewhere in the world, everything is still normal. And do it every day, because trust me, when she comes back, it's going to be those little boring anecdotes that you send off to her and the folks who are working with her that are going to make them realize that everything they're doing is so worthwhile. And those still sit in a stack in our garage to this day, and every once in a while we pull them out and we look at them. And I can't tell you how proud she is of her service, and I can't tell you how proud I am of her. But the story that really made REBOOT jump out in my mind to me as something that I want to give all the support to that I can, was a personal story about when she returned from Iraq. It was years later. We were up in LA, and of all things we were doing, we were buying curtains. And we were in a store that sells curtains. I don't know why we were in LA and not in San Diego, but we were. She'd probably found something up there that was special and different. And as a young man walked out of the back and he saw her put her ID down to pay for the curtains, he saw her military ID and he started asking her, ma'am, where did you, how long have you been in, what do you do, where do you serve? And it turned out he was a corpsman that she had actually worked with when she was in Iraq. And they thought they knew each other on site, but they were trying to figure out where they knew each other from. And through dialogue, they were there together, they began to remember each other and a lot of folks that they worked with. And it was a really great opportunity for them to reconnect. As a workforce development professional, I stood on the side thinking to myself, why in the world is this gentleman selling curtains? This is somebody who, in my wife's own terms, will tell you that if she starts a business tomorrow, she would populate every technical position she had, every clinical position she had with the men and women she served with. Because under the worst possible circumstances, dealing with issues that most people will never see in their lifetime, they performed beautifully and flawlessly. And here he was selling curtains, and there's nothing wrong with selling curtains, but I want to tie that back into my work in a moment. My wife actually grew up in Southern California, and she was lucky enough to be born in a place where she went to one of the better public school systems in the country. When she graduated from high school, she did quite well, so she got into one of the best liberal arts colleges in the country on a scholarship. From there, she went on to get a master's degree and another master's degree in medical school. So by the time she arrived in the desert in Iraq, that's the skill level that she had when she was serving the men and women who were out in the field, coupled with the fact that she had trained at Navy Medical Center here in San Diego, the flagship of Navy medicine. The men and women who served with her didn't have the same path. They weren't from the best public school systems in the country. In fact, almost to a person, they were from some of the poorer urban and rural areas in the country. Most of them didn't go to college, and if they did, they had gone to community college, or they were going back to school through the military at some point in time and continuing degrees. But like I said, she will say to this day, regardless of who she's worked with and regardless of where they've trained, that's the team that she wants to be surrounded by for the rest of her professional career. And that's what I think of every time I think of this program. It doesn't matter what you've been doing. It doesn't matter what particular role you've had in the military. You've built up skills, and you've built up experiences, and you've built up things that are assets in the private sector and in the public sector, and we owe it to you. And there's a lot of people who say, well, people don't owe you anything, but we do. We owe it to you to make sure that at the very least, we're working with you to make the connection between where you've performed so brilliantly in the past and where we need you in the future. Where our region needs you, where your families need you, where you need to be so that you can begin to advance who you are and who you want to be. So I talked to him a bit, and what he basically said to me was, he came back from the military and he'd gone through a TAP program, and he'd gotten a lot of information, and he was told by numerous people that he could go back to school and he could get an advanced certification or a degree, and that he could transition into working in the hospital. But the path was not that simple. Everywhere he went, he ran into roadblocks. And what he basically said was he had bills to pay. And this job paid $12 an hour, and he took it. And so as I was sitting there, I was thinking, good for you, because he did what he thought was the most responsible thing he could, and his customer service was off the charts. But we have a medical shortage in this country. We need more nurses. We need more people in clinical labs. In the next few years, as the workforce retires, we need even more. So our government had trained this young man to do this elite level of work, and we weren't capturing it. We weren't figuring out how to get that work into the private sector, into the public sector where we needed it. And so along with my huge respect for Ronnie Froman and my longtime friendship and professional camaraderie with Maurice, when I first heard about what REBOOT was all about, and I've been thinking about that issue in my mind and all the different places where I hear someone say, well, we have a program that addresses that. And the more I look into the program and the more I investigate it, it really doesn't. The thing that has stood out to me so much about REBOOT is the people who have thought through this program, the course corrections along the way to make sure that the curriculum and all that people are going through is right, and the care that's taken and the respect for the individuals who are coming through this program, regardless of what they see as the next step in their professional career and regardless of what they see as the next step in their lives. We're very proud to be a funder, a very small funder that's part of this program, and we hope in the future that we'll be able to be even a larger source of support and revenue and resources for this program. And I have a feeling that we're going to see this program become one that not only has the coolest name in San Diego when you talk to any program out there in the community, it's memorable, it's catchy, and everyone who hears it loves it, but one that people in Sacramento and Washington and elsewhere are going to begin to take just as serious. So I'd be remiss if I didn't try to give to the best I could, as someone who's been spending 17 years trying to help people connect to where they should go next in their careers, a little bit of unique advice that I'm going to bet you haven't heard in your classes, but I could be wrong, because when Maurice shows me the curriculum, you all have heard and seen almost everything. But there's a couple things that I always tell folks, and it's not what you're going to find in the traditional manuals that you go to when you're hearing about how to write a resume, how to interview, how to network. It's not going to be from books that are probably the conventional books that people think of. The first thing that I'm sure you've heard every step of the way, and just to cement it and make sure it's right, is to know that every connection that you've made, the folks sitting next to you over there, the folks sitting in this room, the people whose hands you haven't even shaken yet. I don't know a single person in San Diego in this economy who's getting a job right now because they went online and posted a resume, or because they answered an ad in the Union Tribune. They're getting the jobs they're getting because of the networking that they've done, the connections that they've made, the friendships that they have, the favors that they've done that they can cash in on, and all of that is so critical and important. So when people tell you that, take it to heart and every step of the way. If you don't know 3 people in this room before we leave, get to know the 3 people in this room before we leave. Because the respect for what you've done and the respect for this program is very, very high. But my 2 pieces of unconventional advice would be this. You've all written your resumes now, and I'm sure you've gotten a lot of advice on how to do that. Once your resume is written and you've shown it to everybody, you've had Maurice or someone who's teaching a class step up and tell you what it should look like and what it should say. Take that resume and show it to someone who absolutely loves you. Someone who, in their mind, you are just wonderful. It could be your child, it could be your spouse, it could be your best friend, it could be your parents. And the reason I want you to do this is think about this. How do you want a business to see you? Do you want a business to see you through the eyes of a resume that you saw online or took out of a book and thought was a good template? Do you want a business to see you through your own eyes, where oftentimes you might be the harshest critic you will ever face? Or do you want a business to see you through the eyes of somebody who thinks that you are just perfect? Those people will help you shine through, even on paper. So as simplistic as that sounds, walk up to someone you love and say, does this tell an employer what is special about me? And I guarantee you, you'll get good feedback. And the second thing I want to do is read to you. I don't usually read when I speak, but I want to make sure I don't flub the words on this in any way, shape, or form. But one book that I would suggest you might want to get and look at, and you could check it out of a library, or you could go to a bookstore, or these days you can just go online, or you can put it in your e-book source, whatever you might have, is a book called The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, and it was written in 1923. And you're not going to find it in a self-help section, and you're not going to find it usually in a college curriculum unless you're reading poetry or classics, because it's a book of prose and it's a book of poetry. But there is one small section in that book that is titled On Work. And I want you to think about this, and sometimes you need to read this or look at it 2 or 3 times to get the message. But the opportunities are going to be out there for you to work. This economy is going to recover as bad as things are now, and your skills are needed. But be thinking every step of the way of where you want to be, who you want to be, and start to kind of chart out what it's going to take to get there. And the luckiest thing for me in my life, other than my son and my family and my wife, is that I've had the ability to get up every day and say for 17 years, I love what I do. I love going to work every day. It's not always easy, and it's not always fun, but I love it every single day. So, final parting words from someone much wiser than I. You've been told also that life is darkness, and in your weariness you echo what was said by the weary. And I say that life is indeed darkness, save where there is urge. And all urge is blind, save where there is knowledge. And all knowledge is vain, save when there is work. And all work is empty, save when there is love. And when you work with love and through love, you bind yourself and to one another and to God. From the bottom of my heart, this is one of the most humbling experiences that I've ever had. I appreciate all that you've done for our country, and I'd be remiss if I didn't just stop by and end by saying thank you for all that you've done. But I'm going to challenge all of you in an economy that I have to speak on, and I have to evaluate, and I have to think of where we put our resources to make sure we're doing the best that we can for the taxpayers of San Diego, California, and the country. Get out to where you're needed most. Get out to where you want to be, and get out to where you know that you can do the work that is best for you, and that is going to lead you to where you want to go as a professional and as a person. And I know those are the messages that have been cemented into you in Reboot. And again, from the bottom of my heart, congratulations.